Welcome to the Lost in Transition podcast. I am your host, Chris Gerard. Atlanta Burrow here as well. Hoping your triathlon season is starting off very well. A lot of people already have one or two races under their belt. I'm a slacker. My first race isn't for another 3 weeks here, but we're all taking our time. The A race for me this year actually coming up in October, so I kind of time shifted things a bit this year. Remember to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Now also available on the TuneIn Radio app. Lots of ways to get the show. In fact, if you go back in our archives and your first open water race is coming up, check out our podcast with Jay Peluso. It was about a month ago. Peluso Open Water Swimming had some great tips on how to be a better open water swimmer. Maybe you already did your first open water race and want to do a little bit better on the next one. Lots of great tips from Jay in that podcast. Check it out on the website, losttransition.com, Facebook, and Twitter for all of our social media updates. Connect with us there and let us know who you'd like to hear on our upcoming shows. In fact, coming up in a couple weeks, we talk to Dr. Simon Marshall and Leslie Patterson. They are the authors of the awesomely titled The Brave Athlete, How to Calm the F Down and Rise to the Occasion. You may know Leslie as a world champion Xterra athlete and coach. Simon, her husband, a sports psychologist for the BMC racing team. And that's going to be a great interview. Looking forward to that coming up in just a couple weeks. Tonight on the show, Amy Dixon. She is an elite para-triathlete. She is 98% blind and the current ITU aquathlon world champion, ranked 4th in the world for visually impaired female triathletes. She's the 2016 USA national team member and shooting for the 2020 Paralympics in Tokyo. It was a lot of fun talking to her. And in fact, recent guest Kirsten Sass served as her guide in the Yokohama ITU race here just a few weeks ago. We'll talk with her also after we talk to Amy next on the Lost in Transition podcast. Amy Dixon is a patient advocate, elite para-triathlete, and motivational speaker. She's the vice president of Glaucoma Eyes International Organization and serves as a coach and mentor to many visually impaired athletes, eye disease, and autoimmune disease patients, helping them live lives beyond their disability and disease. She's the current ITU world champion, ranked 4th in the world for visually impaired female triathletes. She was a 2016 USA national team member and is shooting for the 2020 Paralympics in Tokyo. Amy Dixon, welcome to Lost in Transition.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So your story in athletics and also in vision loss goes back quite a few years, I believe. Can you fill us in a little bit on the background, the circumstance of how you lost your sight? I believe it was a condition called uveitis. Is that correct?
Exactly. So I was diagnosed with a rare form of uveitis, an autoimmune inflammatory eye disease, when I was 22 years old back in college. And it's a type of disease that starts in the periphery of your vision. So it's for most people, they don't notice it until they've lost a significant amount of vision. So it started in the periphery for me. And it's basically, I always say that Looney Tunes cartoon, like when they say that's all, folks, at the end, when it goes from that big wide shot down to a really tight shot at the end. It's exactly what it's like. It's like a really tight shot on a camera lens where if I'm making eye contact with somebody from like a 5-foot conversational distance, I can only see, if I'm making eye contact, I can only see their right eye and their nose, and everything else is black. But as my vision is, if I'm in a big area or a wide open field, I can see far away pretty widely. So it sort of telescopes out as it goes for distance. But up close, I can only see through a little pinhole. But what I can see is fairly clear, the only challenge for me, or one of the only challenges, is that as the higher my heart rate is, the less I can see. So that little, a normally sighted person has 180 degrees of peripheral vision from right to left and top to bottom, so basically half of a circle. Out of 180 degrees, I only have 5 degrees left, so
wow.
About 2% of remaining sight. And so what happens when my heart rate goes up, I have what's called photopsia, where everything is strobing and flashing. And so it's sort of like when you look at the sun and you see spots in front of your eyes for a minute and then they go away. Well, for me, that's what I see all the time. And in very low lighting, I see it very, incredibly distinctly. And so in bright lighting, it's a little bit better. But as my heart rate goes up, that flashing increases to the point where it whites out all of my vision. So when I'm racing in triathlon and my heart rate is high, I can see nothing except for white light. So I'm very dependent upon the women that guide me.
Wow. I hope this isn't a stupid question, but almost when you're racing, would it be better to not even have that 2%? It almost sounds like it is a distraction in a way.
It is a distraction in a way. It's a distraction in a lot of ways. But the blessing for me is that with a little bit of vision that I do have when I do triathlon is that I do have a little bit of an advantage when I'm in like transition and things like that. When my heart rate's not so high, I can see to find my glasses. I can see to find my helmet. I can see to find my bike shoes to put them on. So I'm not fumbling around for those things. On the run, it's a different story. But my vision sort of cuts in and out as my heart rate ebbs and flows and the terrain changes. But yeah, it does definitely help me in transition for sure.
As far as your background in athletics, is that something that started early for you or something that developed out of that disability?
Well, growing up, I rode horses competitively, and I was on the swim team and played tennis and soccer in high school, and then stopped all that when I was studying at the University of Connecticut. And then, I went back to riding competitively for a few years in college, and my athletic career was sort of hung up after that. And when I was diagnosed with this disease and it became worse about 10 years ago, the protocol of treatment, because it's an autoimmune condition, is to suppress your immune system by putting you on high-dose steroids, which A, combat the inflammation, and B, stop the immune system from attacking my eye. And so that worked. Unfortunately, it also caused a 70-pound weight gain. And so I was really frustrated and couldn't figure out what I could do with my new vision loss safely to exercise to lose the weight. And so naturally, a friend of mine suggested, well, why don't you get back in the pool since you're a former swimmer? And I thought, well, that was a great idea because it's a very controlled environment. It's safe. A 25-yard pool is always going to be a 25-yard pool. And, I could, if I had to, I could count my strokes and I could see enough to see the black line on the bottom of the pool. And that's where I started. And then eventually got brave enough to get, after I've lost about 15 pounds in the pool, I took my guide dog upstairs at the local YMCA and started doing some spin classes and lost another 20 pounds there. And then finally said, I'd really, really love to run. And when I was a lot heavier, it was very uncomfortable to even try to run, so I didn't bother. And I thought, well, now I've lost about 30 pounds. It's going to be a little bit less wear and tear in my body. And I started running on a treadmill, sort of holding on until I could figure out, safely how to do that with my limited eyesight. And somebody said, well, you're swimming and you're biking and you're running. Well, have you ever thought about doing triathlon? I thought that was crazy for somebody who was visually impaired. And they said, no, actually, it was going to be a sport in Rio in 2016 at the Paralympics. And if I was interested, they were happy to help guide me. And so we borrowed a 60-pound steel 35-year-old tandem and did our first race together and had such a blast. And I was immediately hooked. And that was in 2013, in June of 2013. So here I am almost 4 years later and having a heck of a lot of fun doing it.
Wow, that's it's incredible. I'm still sort of processing all of this, trying to do what we do with, limited vision and flashing lights. And it's just, I'm impressed. I'll just say it. But I was wondering, as you're talking about that, so what do you find? Obviously the visual impairment presents a challenge. What other challenges do you find you have? What is your biggest challenge as a visually impaired athlete?
My biggest challenge as a visually impaired athlete, especially as a professional athlete now, is finding guides fast enough to guide me for all three phases. It has to be a female. It has to be somebody who has not held their ITU elite license for 12 months prior to guiding me or raced an ITU race as a pro. So that reduces my field significantly. And the biggest challenge for me is definitely finding somebody fast enough to guide me who also, if they're married and have kids, can afford to take the time off of their family to come and join me, because all my races are international races. There's no local sprint triathlons on the ITU circuit. So, and then finding somebody who could just drop things like that, who maybe doesn't have a job or has a job that has the flexibility to do that. And the other problem with ITU racing is that you apply to the start list, and when you apply, you apply 2 months prior to the race, and you don't find out until 30 days prior to the race. So a lot of times it's like, oh, we're going to Japan. Oh no, we're not going to Japan. Whether or not you got on the start list or on the wait list for that race. So that can be really really challenging. So somebody who's sort of got that flexibility and is also that fast has really been hard for me.
It sounds like, it just kind of adds to that it's sort of that extra piece of gear almost, the logistics. If you can manage that, I think you can manage anything in life, getting another person of that caliber for sure. Now, if you meet someone, so let's say somebody who is visually impaired is looking to either get into triathlon or to swim, bike, or run, what resources are available to them? What resources were you able to find, or what is new since you've gotten involved?
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of really good organizations. One is called Achilles International, and they're based out of New York City. They have chapters all over the country and actually all over the world, and they provide sighted guides. They mostly focus on running races, but they do a fair amount of triathlons as well. So they're actually the first resource, them along with Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a veterans nonprofit that actually pairs civilians and veterans together. And so that was where my first guide was from. She was actually the triathlon director for Team Red, White, and Blue. And even though I'm not a military veteran, I love training with those guys and getting to know everybody and just being sort of part of that community. So that's a great resource as well, Team Red, White, and Blue, Achilles. Another is Challenge Athlete Foundation, which is based out here in San Diego. They don't necessarily provide guides, but I've met a lot of people through them, a lot of people that volunteer with them. And then finally, there is a new website that my friend Richard Hunter, who's a blind triathlete from Sacramento, California, he's also done several Ironmans as a visually impaired athlete, and he's just really incredible and run, I don't know, countless marathons and ultra marathons. He started a website called unitedinstride.com, and that is a resource, a database that you can sign up for free, whether you're blind or you're wanting to become a guide. And it pairs athletes and guides in every city around the country, which is great. So when I travel, because I do a lot of public speaking, I'll go on that site and I'll say, okay, I'm going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio on May 15th for 2 days, and I need to do a tempo run for an hour at such and such a pace, and who's available. So like somebody will go on there, and it'll ping somebody in that area, and they can go on there and be like, oh, I'm available. I can run those paces comfortably. Great. Let's go run together. So that's really fun. It's been very helpful to me.
That's something that I hadn't necessarily thought of. I thought of the need for a guide in a race, but obviously if you're training outside especially, you definitely are going to need that all over the place wherever you go. As far as exactly. Characteristics that make a good guide, you mentioned already, obviously, for you've got to find somebody who fits in that very narrow window of very good but not professional. But outside of just being fast and winning, which is always important, what other characteristics make for a good guide for someone?
Somebody who's a very good communicator. I always say to guides, if you see it, say it. So you sort of have to have a running monologue. I just trained with Emily Cox, who's an amazing, recently retired Ironman pro, and she lives up in Northern California. And actually, she and I are going to race together next year because she's not eligible to guide me this year because she raced so recently as a pro. But we've been training together, and chemistry is super important, and really just articulating exactly what's going on and all the thoughts in your head. She's like, okay, we've got a hill coming up. It's about a 10% grade. Okay, and it's about 200 meters. Okay, we're on the hill. Okay, you're about 50 yards in. Some blind athletes don't like that much information. I love it because it helps me visualize mentally what's going on around me. It also makes me suffer a little bit less. A lot of times my guides will lie to me and tell me, we're almost there. You're like, you got 10 more meters. I'm like, you said 10 more meters 10 meters ago, that kind of thing. So that's always hilarious. But somebody who, communicates potholes, manhole covers, curbs coming up, gear change when you're on the bike, gear selection, things like that. You got a bump coming up, whatever it is. We got a 90-degree turn coming up in 50 meters. Okay, 5 meters. Okay, right-hand turn now, and things like that. Because during a race, they're actually not allowed to touch us in an ITU race. They consider a leading penalty where they're leading the blind athlete, which is not allowed. There are certain areas on the course that are clearly marked, sort of like a littering zone that you would have on an Ironman course. There's a VI, or visually impaired leading zone, around certain turns and certain areas in and out of transition that the guide is allowed to touch the athlete. And so it's very important that the guide knows when it's okay to help the athlete and when it's not.
Interesting. I would imagine the rules are slightly different once you get into the deafblind athletes, correct? For communication purposes, or not?
I wish they were. Right now, it's just because there's not, unfortunately, enough deafblind athletes that have raced on the ITU circuit to dictate them adapting the rules. And I think that that is an important concern, because I just ran a camp for visually impaired triathletes out in Chula Vista here at the Olympic Training Center last winter. And of the 15 athletes I had 3 deafblind athletes in attendance. And, they really do need to be touched, to be told how, what's coming up if there's a hill. They do a type of sign language called protactile. And the protactile sign language requires that the guide is touching their hand and, pushing their fingers facing up to let them know there's a hill coming, or down to let them know there's a downhill, right and left to let them know about turns, and then they have a way to communicate stopping. And so that it'll be really cool to see, as more deafblind athletes get involved in the sport, how that's going to affect the rules and what rule changes are going to be adapted, because they are going to have to adapt that for the deafblind athletes. There's no way to communicate otherwise.
Exactly. I did see the video the local NBC affiliate did on the camp. What was the impetus for creating that camp? I know you directed it. Did anybody else, come up with the idea? Did you put it out there? Or how did that come to be?
I came up with the idea because last year I was on the Para-Triathlon national team, and one of my frustrations with the camps that we were attending was that the instruction we were getting was not specific to our disability. They were generalized triathlon coaching, which was coaching exercises that we're doing, which were great and very, very helpful, and it makes all of us faster and better athletes. But there was nobody out there saying, listen, you're blind. I know how to specifically make a blind athlete safer, faster, and more efficient, and have better communication with their guides. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert in that area, but I've made every dumb mistake, because now that I've been racing a lot for 4 years, and I've had the opportunity to meet so many blind athletes from all over the world who have also made every mistake, or we've sort of rigged our own homemade tethers that go around our waist, around our wrist. We've done different swim tethers. We've done different drafting techniques off of our guide. We've tried different methods of measuring power on a tandem, which is really hard to do, by the way. Like, it's very hard to do either crank-based or hub-based power, because who's putting out the power, you or your guide?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're definitely not even at all times. So it's, all these, do you do pedal-based power meters? All these things that are coachable and instructable. I was like, I can teach this, and I can help people be safer and have a little more fun and be a little faster doing triathlon while blind. There's a amazing facility out here in California, and I think they're actually a chain nationally. It's called Swim Labs, and Swim Labs has endless pools. And my guide and I, before a big race last year, we were trying to figure out a way to get me faster in the water. And, we worked a lot on my stroke in the endless pool. But then she and I would get in and swim in it next to each other, and I would learn how to draft on her hip, because I'm almost totally blind in my right eye. She swims on my right side, and I was constantly either crashing into her or swimming too far away from her. So we came up with a technique that I'm able to stay there, and then I had somebody literally standing over us and reaching into the pool and pushing me up on her hip and saying, this is exactly where you need to be legal, because there is a legal distance that I'm allowed to be away from her. If I'm away from her more than 1.5 meters, I get disqualified. So I have to make sure that I'm in the legal zone and that she's not pulling me, but I also want to make sure that I'm taking advantage of as much of her draft as I possibly can to save myself some energy. So it was really fascinating. So it was something that I could teach to other athletes once I learned how to do it myself. So it's been a wonderful learning curve, and I just was so excited to go out and help people learn how to do transitions more safely, to do things from muscle memory, and then also to put the guides in the shoes of the athlete and say, listen, we're going to blindfold you and make you do all the things that your athlete does. And it made them better communicators, because they're like, oh gosh, all of a sudden they had empathy, like, how do I find my shoes? How do I find my shoes? I'm like, well, you need to put them where they're supposed to be every single time. So wow. Really, really cool stuff. And I was so excited to do it, and I can't wait to do it again next year.
I was going to say, do you have, you must have demand for it again.
Yeah, I was surprised. I initially talked to some of my friends, because I did my first camp with the Challenge Athlete Foundation out here 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago. And, I was talking with the director there, and he was saying, when we started pitching this idea, I said, hey, I was thinking about doing this camp. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but it sounds like a lot of fun. And like, I don't know, do I just rent out the Olympic Training Center and hope people show up? He goes, yeah, if you get like 5 to 8 people, that's like a nice sized group. And I had like 25 people call me and go, yeah, I'm in. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's a lot of people. So we ended up with 15, which was still probably too many people, but we ended up making it work. In hindsight, I think 10 would have been a better number. And having the additional challenge of having, of the visually impaired population, it's worldwide, only 5% of the visually impaired population are totally blind. When people think of blind people, they think of black blindness. That only makes up 5% of those that have vision loss. So my camp, I was expecting most people to have a little bit of vision like me. Of the 15 people, we had 10 totally blind athletes and 3 deaf-blind athletes, which was really, really challenging. So I actually contacted a friend of mine who is a swim coach, and she volunteers at the VA hospital out in Chicago, and she works with totally blind swimmers. And I had to learn how to teach swim technique to people that were totally blind, because you can't just say high elbow to somebody who's totally blind. They have no idea what that means. Mm-hmm. So you actually have to physically get into the pool with them and move their body through an actual swim stroke, which was really cool, but it also took up a lot of time at the camp, which meant that the swim sessions were going to be very, very long, because it was a lot of hands-on instruction, which meant I needed a lot of volunteers and a lot of coaches.
You also work as a patient advocate. Is that something that was born out of your journey? Yeah, one of the best things about me is that I don't take no for an answer. It probably also gets me into a lot of trouble. And I have a little bit of knowledge. I was working on my doctorate on my PharmD when I got diagnosed with my eye disease and couldn't finish pharmacy school, because they weren't going to let somebody who's blind become a pharmacist. Unfortunately, they said, Vicodin, aspirin, it all feels the same, that kind of thing.
Good point.
Like, yeah, that really doesn't work out. I had the medical background, so I was able to research, my eye disease and find the best doctors for what I had. And luckily, that was the beginning of the internet, before, Google was really a thing. Back when we had Earthlink and all those kinds of things.
Alta Vista.
And so remember Earthlink?
Yes.
So yeah, I was lucky that I was able to do some research and actually go to the library and look things up about my disease and find the doctor that had discovered and named my disease. And then I saved up all my, I had no health insurance at the time, so I saved up all my tips and managed to go there and find this guy and figure out how to treat my disease. I was never going to be able to cure it, but we could possibly get it into remission, which is what I did. And it just took like finding the right doctor, the right people to surround me, and keep pushing them to think outside of the box, and keep pushing them to realize that I am too young to be losing my vision to a disease that has a way of managing itself. So I got really frustrated when I started seeing other patients go through what I went through in the early stages of either having a really bad doctor that basically sent them home to go blind and was not going to intervene in any way, or people that didn't have insurance or the money to pay for these doctor visits like I had when I first got diagnosed, and recognizing that there's different programs out there available to help them. But if you're either not educated or you're just scared to the point where you're frozen and you can't make a decision or you don't know where to turn, like, it's nice to know that somebody who's been there, done that, can sort of help you, guide you through the process. And and everybody's really taught to be intimidated by the guy in the white coat. Especially my parents' generation. My mom goes to the specialist and she's like, walks out of there with more questions than she started with. I said, well, why didn't you ask the questions? Well, I didn't want to trouble him. I'm like, well, that's what he's there for. It's like, you don't want to bother him, or you feel like you're being rude, or you feel like you're challenging them. I said, this is what they went to school for. They like to be challenged. They want to start thinking outside of the box. They want you to be an active participant in your care and not to just be a patient. They want you to be a team member. And so, I started looking at managing my disease as a team approach. So I've got, and my endocrinologist, my neurologist, my gastroenterologist, I have 5 different ophthalmologists, and all these guys sort of work in concert to keep me as healthy as possible in order to do what I do every day, which is beat the heck out of my body running, biking, and swimming. So it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, and I'm glad that you're able to take those skills that you found that helped you and help others with that.
It's been interesting because I've had a lot of patients contacting me either through my website or through I started out in a patient support group on Facebook, and I just was hearing horror story after horror story, and I was just like, this is ridiculous in this day and age that these things still happen. But it does. I mean, and even in our country, with all the money that we have here, people still lose their vision to very treatable diseases, which is really, really sad for me to see. And so if I can do anything on my end to help them and keep their sight for as long as they can, I'm more than happy to do it.
Indeed. So now, with the visual impairment, do you feel like it gives you any advantage that a sighted person may not have or may not realize?
Yeah, well, it made for a great 20-year career as a wine specialist. So
you stole my next question.
Yes.
Right?
Tell us about this. Yeah, tell us more.
Right. So I was a CSW, a Certified Specialist of Wines at the Society of Wine Educators for the past 20 years, and I worked in retail. I was a buyer for a chain of retail stores in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And so my nose and my palate were the most important things, and I was able to focus on those and do very well with literally blind tasting. And so that was super cool. And then in triathlon, I think for me, it's a huge advantage because I have a guide, and basically, it feels like cheating sometimes because you have a coach, somebody running right next to you who's your cheerleader and your coach, and who's going to, and they're playing psychologist all at the same time. So they're talking you through the rough moments of your race. They're encouraging you when you're not feeling good. And they're, we pre-discuss, some things. I say, okay, I'm going to get really ugly at mile 2 on the run, and I may say some things I don't mean, and it's not directed at you. It's really directed at my body, and I'm just mad. And so, and I'm like, and here's how you can help me through it. So we talk about, all right, she's going to focus on hips up, chest up, shoulders back, chin up, drive with your elbows, high knees. You engage those glutes, all these kinds of things. So, we just work on form cues, take it. Okay, let's reset your breathing, deep breath, all those things. Or you're doing great. You got, all right, give me 20 good steps, or you got 200 meters. This is a 200 meter. I want you to do 6-minute pace for 200 meters, and then hold that, and then we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to go again. So all those things, I mean, who else has that kind of an advantage when they're racing? Nobody. And so I really am so grateful for my guides, because I think I would have DNF'd many races without them. Even if I was sighted, I probably would have DNF'd a lot of these races.
Well, sure, my own devices. Because you're out there as part of a team, for sure. So are there any? Yeah,
it really is.
Are there any myths or misconceptions about visually impaired athletes or para-triathlon in general that you'd like to debunk?
The thing for me is that that the bar has been set really low. That prior to the past couple of years, that now that I'm seeing more and more fast visually impaired triathletes participating in triathlon, that it was like, yay, they're participating, like everybody gets a medal kind of thing. And where it was sort of like good for you and attaboy, and it was so condescending on so many levels. It's like, no, some of these people are really badass.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
that they're right. Like it was sort of just like good for you for getting out of the house and putting on your shoes. I'm like, some of these people are really elite level athletes who are fast, and that it was just the bar had been set really low. And so there was very low level of expectation. And I think now that we've had one Paralympic cycle of it being a sport, people are recognizing that, yes, these are not just athletes like that get to participate in the sport. These are athletes that are at the top of the sport. And if they were fully sighted, they would also be elite. So that's really cool for me, and a myth that really is frustrating to me, which is why I held that camp, because I wanted to. I didn't make the camp for total beginners. I wanted to do it for athletes that had done a minimum of 3 triathlons and had a decent finish time, you know, based on their age and ability level, and to show that, yes, that they can not only participate in an Ironman, they can be a fast Ironman athlete. So I'm excited to sort of watch where the future of para-triathlon goes in the visually impaired category.
As far as triathlon in general, our community, what on a local level, what can be done to make the sport more accessible for the visually impaired? Obviously, you're competing at the very elite end of the spectrum, but you're having to travel for all these races too. For people that don't have that kind of budget that want to race in local races, what are some ways that I guess race organizers or the triathlon community in general can go about making that a reality for people?
2 things. One is any course is going to be friendly for a visually impaired athlete. Like I've had I've had athletes come to me and say, "Oh, we contacted the race director for this triathlon locally, and he said that no, we can't race." I'm like, "That's ridiculous. Why?" For a wheelchair athlete, I could see that because certain courses may have stairs or may have, on the run, or it's too dangerous to have a racing wheelchair out there where there's a bunch of runners that may not know that there's a racing wheelchair coming on the run course. So in those circumstances, I can see why. But for visually impaired athletes, there is no reason why they can't participate in every single local sprint distance triathlon. A tandem may suffer on a very steep climb, but there's no reason why they can't do it. And the other thing is that, and I just heard this from another athlete, is that a lot of the race directors charge for the guide to participate in the race, which is really not cool because the guide is actually a piece of equipment. I mean, they're a human being, but at the end of the day,
but really, yeah.
I can't race without my guide, and they're just as important as having my bike or my running shoes. So that I find upsetting, and it's really should be something that's standardized. Although I just had this discussion with somebody about Ironman distance racing, about Ironman is now starting to charge for guides to participate in their races. And I can see why at some races that would be necessary because, there's so much involved. There's so many moving parts to an Ironman race, and where they have like race bags and they have, go into different sponsor tents, and there's so much swag and things like that. So they are really a second athlete. But, for the amount of visually impaired athletes that are participating right now in Ironman distance races, I think that they could eat the $30 that it costs them out of pocket.
I was going to say, covering the cost is really minor. Or
the $5, but that's just my personal opinion. But if they were to make it a sticking point, we do want to be considered as equals as able-bodied athletes. So if we're going to be considered as equals as able-bodied athletes are, then we should pay. So I'm sort of ambivalent about that, but I do think at local races, there's no reason why that they should charge for a guide to participate in the race because they are a piece of equipment. Well, a very loving, wonderful.
Exactly. They may eat a banana or drink some water and Gatorade, but that's it. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So over the past few years as you've been racing, is there a race that stands out particularly that was your favorite?
Ooh, the race I just got back from actually in Japan is probably still my favorite. Yeah, Yokohama is just amazing. It's the most beautifully organized. It goes off like a hitch. Everything is flawless. The Japanese people are so proud and so enthusiastic to have everybody there. they have gifts for all the athletes. I mean, you're treated like royalty, and everything goes off on time, bar none. And they're very much about making sure the athletes are comfortable, and everybody's informed, and everything's really clear. And the course is it's really challenging, but it's lovely. It's perfectly maintained, and it's really, and the race hotel, the host hotel is directly across from the finish line. You've got beautiful views. The run course goes through a magnificent rose garden. So it's, for us visually impaired athletes, it smells amazing.
There it is.
Which is really fun. So it's like a sensory experience as well. And I just love that race. And it helps that I won it last year, so that always makes it seem a little sweeter to be there.
Yeah, that helps it be a favorite. No, that's great.
Winning it always makes it a nicer venue.
That does raise the point, though. Racing for you is incredibly expensive because every race is outside the country. Every race needs a tandem bike transported. You have guides that are coming along with you. And I know that you had, before Japan, set up a donation page. Is that still active for people that if they want to?
It's still active. It's on my website. It's on my Facebook page and also on my website, amydixonusa.com. And the biggest challenge this year is that after the Paralympics, we needed to re-qualify to be back on the national team this year. And because of the race calendar last year, as we were all trying to qualify for Rio, a lot of us, even several athletes that went to Rio, are not on the national team this year because we didn't race enough last season. We were racing really conservatively. And so I would say 10 of us lost our funding this year from USA Triathlon. So we're all independent. So, and for the visually impaired athletes, that is twice as expensive because we have to pay for all of our travel, our lodging, our airfare and hotel for not only us, but for our guides. And I don't expect my guides to pay because they're all volunteers from different parts of the country that are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. I mean, they're not getting any money for it. They're not getting anything else other than, the fact that they're giving back to their sport. So that last race cost me almost $8,000 just for 1 hour of fun. So now I'm working hard to get enough points to get back, and enough qualification criteria to get back on the national team for 2018. But again, that's a very expensive road. So the amount of funding that USA Para-Triathlon provides, I'll be lucky if I break even this year with the amount of money that I'm going to spend, because I'm probably going to spend. I've got 3 more races overseas. I've got 2 in Canada and 1 in Europe. At the World Championships in Rotterdam. So the amount of money I'm going to spend is probably going to outweigh the funding that I'm going to earn next year if I get back on the national team. So it's really a double-edged sword. It's quite a lot of pressure.
But that opportunity is out there. If anyone in the listening audience wants to help you do these amazing things, we will definitely link that up in the show notes. Also, you mentioned the website, amydixonusa.com, a wonderful site. You got lots of race reports and posts there, information on all of your fun stuff that you do too, including the wine specialist. That's where I got that from. Social media, looks like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, correct?
Yes, sir.
Anywhere else where people should follow you or learn more?
Oh, yeah. Well, certainly my Facebook page is a busy place, and I'm a rather prolific Facebook and Instagram poster. My Instagram and Twitter handles are No Site, No Limits. So that's kind of how I roll.
Wonderful. And the next race, you mentioned 2 in Canada, 1 in Europe. What's the next one on the calendar for you?
Next on the calendar is a World Cup in Magog, which is near Mont-Tremblant in Montreal. So that'll be in sort of northeast or southeast Canada, and then the next one will be in Edmonton. That will be an ITU race, and that's a big one and an important one to get points to get into World Championships, which will be in Rotterdam in September.
Excellent. Well, best of luck in your 2017 season, Amy Dixon, and thanks for being a great guest on the Lost in Transition podcast. And just to compare notes, we're going to talk to Kirsten Sass just after the break to get her input on what it was like to be a guide in Yokohama. So thanks so much for joining us, Amy, and all the best in 2017.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Kirsten Sass is a leading female age group triathlete in West Tennessee and also guide for our guest tonight, Amy Dixon, a blind para-triathlete racing in Yokohama. Kirsten, how did you find her?
Actually, she found me, interestingly enough. I guided for a girl in Sarasota back in the spring, and she actually called me. I was driving home from doing the long course duathlon nationals, and Yvonne called and said, would you be interested in guiding for another triathlete? Her guide fell through. She's had some issues. She's been training for this race. And I was like, sure, I'd be more than happy to. So Yvonne gave my contact information to Amy, and within the span of minutes, Amy contacted me, and we chatted on the phone, and all the stars aligned, and I was able to go with her to Yokohama, which was just an incredible experience.
Wow. So you have guided before, like you said. You Amy found you through Yvonne. How was this the same or different guiding Amy?
Yvonne was a great starting point for me because she was just getting back into triathlon, so it was really a no-pressure race. It was just her getting her feet wet again and me learning how the guiding process works. This was a little different because Amy has been training really, really hard for this race. It was across the world rather than just south of where I live.
Yes.
And there's a lot more on the line for Amy.
So Amy and you weren't able to train together, located in different spots, until just a couple days before the race in Japan. In your second time, I guess, in a race being a guide, how did you prepare to work in tandem with her in that short time period?
Well, fortunately, I called on a good friend of mine who has a tandem, and he's a pretty experienced rider. And so I was able to practice with him one time before I left, just working on more cornering and turnarounds and the more technical aspect of just riding on a tandem with somebody. So that helped me feel a little bit better before I went to Japan. And Amy and I used every opportunity we had to get out there and ride together. They had a course. Not really a course preview, I guess a little mini course set up that we could practice on that involved a lot of turns on the cobblestones. That was kind of our recurring theme for the weekend. So we practiced on that, and then they did have a course preview ride on Friday, which we did, and then the race was Saturday. So by then we did feel pretty comfortable. Fortunately, we're pretty evenly matched, and we did really well. We hit it off, and everything kind of fell in sync. So we felt pretty comfortable pretty quickly together.
What's one thing that surprised you about being a guide, or opened your eyes maybe to something that you don't think about when you're racing yourself, but when you're leading a blind athlete, all of a sudden you realize how different something is?
Oh my gosh, there are so many things we take for granted. Like, on the swim course, it's one thing if I swim off course by myself, but if I'm leading somebody else, I sure don't want to go off course. And then you really have to pay attention to the other swimmers coming by and make sure that they don't swim over the person you're guiding. And you got to find a way to signal to them when you're going around a buoy or making a turn. When Yvonne and I raced together, our tether that connected the two of us was around our calves. So when I turned right, it pulled her lower leg right, but swung her left. So I was swimming in one direction, and she was swimming
say that that's not going to work very well.
So it's all those little things you don't think about. And then, on the bike, you got somebody who can't see on the back. You got to warn them if there's a bump coming up or a sharp turn or a hill or a downhill. You just have to constantly communicate. And then on the run, just a little 1-inch slip in the pavement, we don't think a thing about. But if you're not expecting it and dragging your foot, you're going to trip and fall, right? The situation that Amy was in going into this race where one guy just fell through and then another, and here she was faced with the option of not being able to go and race simply because she didn't have anybody who could help her race. I mean, can you just imagine?
Yeah, especially for such a big event. And we hear that you guys will continue to work together this year.
Yes. Amy and I hit it off, and I loved racing with her. And I told her anytime she wants to race, if we can swing it, I would be happy to. And Yvonne has actually been in touch with me again about guiding for her in another race. So the world of guiding needs guides. So if anybody out there wants to help, definitely need to let me know or let somebody know.
Well, and as Amy mentioned about finding guides, fast guides are even harder to find, so you fill a very, very important role. By the way, congratulations on winning Memphis in May, the hometown triathlon. Was your husband out there in the Elvis get up again this year?
Oh, he was full force Elvis, both days.
Which Elvis does he do? Does he do young Elvis, old fat Elvis, or what era of Elvis?
You know, I don't even know exactly. I just know that he has several different suits, so he was dressed in a white suit on Saturday and a blue suit on Sunday.
Oh, so he goes all out.
Yeah.
Look like
I tell everybody, I don't get so nervous about the race. I just get nervous that he's going to remember all the words to the national anthem. And I'm happy to say that he did. So
thank goodness. Well, and it looks like it was a pretty good event this year. There were two days of racing, and I think maybe about 700 in total between those 2 days, it looked like, at least what I saw in the media. So it looks like it was a very good event all around. Otherwise, how's your season going so far, and what's coming up still for this year for you?
Well, so far so good. I'm still just kind of playing around right now. All my big events are going to be in the fall, Worlds and Nationals. So I'll do Nationals, and then for duathlon, I guess that's the next real big thing, and that'll be the end of June.
Excellent. Well, we'll keep an eye on that as things keep rolling in for you this year. Best of luck in the remainder of 2017, and glad that we got to talk to you again on the podcast.
Yes, and have fun with Amy.
Thank you, guys.
And Yvonne.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks again to Amy Dixon and Kirsten Sass for being our guests this week on the Lost in Transition podcast. Check out the show notes for links to all of those organizations and learn how you might be able to be a guide for a visually impaired athlete or otherwise support the para-triathlon activities that are going on out there. Follow us at losttransition.com, Facebook and Twitter on social media. And if you listen and enjoy the show, please rate and review. It makes all the difference in finding us in the rankings. You can rate and review on iTunes, also on Stitcher. Not sure about Google Play. I don't think they support rankings and reviews yet, but you can check it out there. And also leaving a review on Facebook is helpful as well, helping us reach more triathletes out there. Also check over our partners over the Crushing Iron podcast, their latest show, Post-Race Recovery and Using This Race for Your Next One. An early season race is a great way to catapult your season, but the week after you cross that finish line is very critical, and they're going to explore what you should do not only to recover, but use the biggest training day of the year in an effective way, breaking down Ironman Chattanooga 70.3 that went on last weekend for 5 of the Crushing Iron athletes, finding out what they learned and what they are working on as the season moves forward. New episodes each Monday and Thursday. Check them out at crushingiron.com. We'll talk to you again soon. For Lana Burrow, I'm Chris Gerard. Until next time, may all your transitions be smooth.